The Eisai Cogstate partnership started just over a year ago now, when we began to tackle the enormous health crisis that is identification of memory impairment in the community. We began that partnership in Japan, and we're really proud to be able to announce now that we've extended it globally.
Eisai is working very hard to develop a new Alzheimer's drug globally. We are very happy collaborating with Cogstate for their products. Cogstate brief battery, for example, for usage of regular people will greatly helpful for us to check our brain performance in a regular life setting, which is a good thing for us to increase the awareness to the disease. Also, Cognigram for professional usage is contributing to checking the cognitive function at the clinics or hospitals in a relatively short time and easily.
When we began discussions with Eisai, one of the things that really impressed us was their commitment not just to therapeutic drug development, but to the build out of a broader ecosystem to support those individuals suffering from Alzheimer's disease. With an aging population across the globe and the increasing incidence of Alzheimer's disease, the health crisis that is the management and care of Alzheimer's disease patients has never been more acute. One of the critical aspects of that is, and the critical aspects with respect to treatment of those patients, is the early identification of disease.
Cognitive decline and impairment remain core clinical features of Alzheimer's disease, and our ability to detect changes in people's memory, their learning, their thinking are central to the diagnosis of the disease, not just at the stage of dementia, but also at earlier stages of the disease, pre-dementia, or what we might term mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease.
Well, this is a very exciting time, I think, for Alzheimer's and the development of potential new therapies. There have been a number of recent successes in phase 3 and phase 2 studies, and in fact, there's now one treatment that's in front of the FDA. And so I think there's every reason to believe that in the near future, we will actually have disease-modifying treatments for Alzheimer's disease that are available to patients.
We've learned that this large cognitive impairment that we see in people who are presenting with dementia actually begins many decades before. And we can see it, but it manifests as very, very subtle changes in memory. These subtle changes can occur 20 years before an individual has problems with thinking that are sufficient to warrant a diagnosis of dementia. So we have 20 years where we could intervene and prevent those subtle changes becoming large changes or becoming large impairments.
One of the important aspects of these disease-modifying therapies is that every day when you're not taking one of the therapies, and you should be, you're having brain cells die, and those brain cells won't ever come back. And so it's very important to find people at this MCI stage and even at the beginning of the MCI stage so that these disease-modifying treatments can be initiated and they will provide their greatest benefit in that way.
And yet we know we diagnose Alzheimer's disease late, several years into symptoms, and our tools for early diagnosis are not as sensitive as we would like, so we miss a lot of cases even when we do pay attention to them. And physicians don't always have the time, the skill, or the resources to do cognitive testing themselves, so we're going to need to have better ways of identifying people who can benefit from the first disease modifiers.
Even in the absence of disease-modifying therapy, a timely diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or dementia is particularly important for maintaining the safety of patients, reducing risk related with Alzheimer's disease, promoting healthy lifestyles. But there is substantial underdiagnosis by clinicians and underreporting by patients and families themselves.
If we think of how we're going to identify all of the people who might benefit legitimately from an early disease modifier, we're going to need to do a lot of objective cognitive testing. And that's a lot of burden to place on our current healthcare system where physicians don't have the time or the skill. So having a computerized test that one could do in the privacy of one's home, a test that's sensitive and reliable to the early stages of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease, could be a very big boon to facilitating early diagnosis without adding to the strain of an already challenging healthcare system.
So Cogstate is really uniquely positioned to be able to play a major role in this. Cogstate has been a real pioneer in terms of developing these computerized cognitive tests, which are very sensitive. But another important aspect of these tests is that they can be scaled to large numbers of people.
Even if you present them to doctors complaining of problems in your thinking, or your spouse or someone known to you is saying that they're concerned about you, it still remains relatively difficult for doctors to make a diagnosis, or rather to identify that an individual is having difficulty with their cognition.
The advantage that Cogstate provides is the ability to deliver into clinical practice simple, reliable, and brief assessment tools that are fully automated and well standardized and well suited to this purpose. Another key advantage is the ability to deploy assessments in the patient's own home, vastly increasing the accessibility of the tests.
To have all of those characteristics in a single tool or in a single system is really difficult to achieve.
Another good advantage of Cogstate products are all of those checking items are strongly supported by the significant database, which assure the results' accuracy.
Through our more than 20 years of research, Cogstate has an enormous database in respect of assessment of memory in healthy people as well as Alzheimer's disease patients. Over time, that database is only going to grow and allowing us to gain further insights, to increase the sensitivity of those tests, and in the long run to improve the management of disease in that patient population.
In diagnosing Alzheimer's disease, there's a stepwise process that really cannot be bypassed. You need to take a history. You need to hear what the cognitive symptoms are. Is it memory, word finding, a whole host of things? Are people losing their way? So you get a sense of that from the history. You also need to, in a focused history, understand how the cognitive symptoms are impacting daily living. So the history, great, but then you need to do some cognitive testing. And the traditional testing is paper and pencil testing in a physician's office or very long neuropsychological test batteries in a psychologist's office. We just don't have the time or the resources to do all of that testing, that face-to-face testing that will be needed to identify these early patients, and yet testing cognition cannot be skipped.
Alzheimer's disease has been a difficult challenge in a lot of ways, but I've been working in the field since the end of last century, and I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time in the field than there is right now.
Any partnerships that can move us in the direction of allowing patients who deserve these new medications to access them, be it through better cognitive testing, more efficient testing, combined with the other elements that need to be resolved in order for us to move patients through a journey that will successfully allow them to go on new therapies, is very exciting, and we must enable this.
We are very much proud of collaborating globally with Cogstate.
And likewise, we're really happy to be collaborating with Eisai. Having worked with them for more than 12 months now, they've demonstrated themselves to be very committed to the long-term treatment and improvement of health outcomes for individuals suffering from Alzheimer's disease. They've proven a willingness to invest heavily and make sure that this partnership is a success. And we're really proud to be working with them globally.